Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this webinar today, Optimizing Chromebook Performance in Enterprise Environments. I'll be joined here by Boris Rogier, our Chief Operating Officer, and I'm glad to have you on board. Thank you for joining us for this really cool topic, just because a lot of us are starting to use Chromebooks, and we know now that Chromebooks are really not just for kids anymore. They're starting to be adopted by enterprise much more than most people will think. And actually, the latest statistics show that retail is the leading application for Chromebooks after education, then healthcare. We have contact centers, a lot of people with remote contact center agents logging in through Chromebooks, financial services, so retail banking, a lot of devices in use, and also manufacturing environments where the Chromebooks are used on the manufacturing floor, in the warehouses, in logistics centers. And it's incredible growth that we're seeing, especially in the past couple of years. Big adoption of 30 million in last year alone. Massive growth rate, more than doubling the year before in these different sectors. And there's a couple of really good reasons why Chromebooks are starting to hit mainstream at this level. They're extremely simple, but not just simple to use, but it's very simple to onboard people and to train them on it. So you can bring people up to speed in a way that don't have an education cycle of teaching someone how to use operating systems and applications, because it just runs natively through a web browser. It's extremely secure just because of the way the operating system was built from the bottom up. Of course, they're affordable and very easy to manage remotely. So anyone here on the call who's an admin on Chromebooks knows very well a lot of remote management tools, and we'll take a look at a few of those in just a few minutes. However, of course, the affordable and the simple side of a Chromebook also comes with a few limitations, right? And some of those cause performance issues. So the fact is that Chromebooks have usually a very limited amount of RAM. And for anyone who likes to use a lot of open tabs, that can be a problem. The CPU isn't at the level you would always see in a regular laptop PC or a Mac. And of course, a Chromebook is really just a piece of silicon if it doesn't have network access. And there's not a lot of applications that are used on Chromebooks that are not highly dependent on the latency and accessibility of a high quality network. And we'll look at why that's causing over 80% of the problems today in a Chromebook user experience. So the top 5 causes of why Chromebook performance can suffer, it's really quite a diverse chain of events that go all the way from the on-premise or the work from home type user all the way through to the software as a service, SaaS applications, and cloud hosted applications that they're using. It starts really with the device itself. Are there a lot of plugins installed on the device? Are there any background processes? Is the browser performing? Is it up to spec? Does it have the latest Chrome updates? Going a little further, we already hit the network very quickly with the Wi-Fi. It's not just the Wi-Fi itself. The quality of that is essential, especially if you're moving around or you're a mobile employee, but also the quality of your internet service provider that's sitting behind it and their ability to choose the right domain name server. So basically the DNS, making sure you're resolved into the hosts that are closest to you and not redirecting you through the wrong location if browser location services aren't working properly. After that, if you're in an enterprise environment, there's a very good chance that you're using a zero trust network of some sort, a VPN, CASB, or a SASE solution that's really handling the cloud gateway for security. Those run very well on a Chromebook, but the proxies that are used, the networks that they create, can add an incredible amount of latency. Chromebook or not, this is one of the biggest problems we see with enterprise and SaaS applications. And then after that, you might be tunneled through a software-defined network, or you're using direct internet access, and then you're really in a public network environment. Are the service providers along the path performing? Are they routing your traffic in the way that is most optimal to your applications or not? So a lot of complexity in this area, and very hard to pinpoint. If a Chromebook user calls you and says, I'm having a really big problem, like I have latency, things are slow, non-responsive. IT usually has a hard time with that. If you're an admin, it's not always the Wi-Fi, and the latency can come from a lot of different places. So we'll show you live how you could actually solve that problem. And then finally, it's not actually crazy that the application itself might not be performing properly. And we all know there's days where MS Office 365 is down or Teams is unreachable and different reasons. regions on different devices through different ISPs. And it's really a complex network out there. And to pin that on the Chromebook as the source of the problem would be premature and lead you down a troubleshooting path that really wouldn't get you anywhere productively. So let's take a look at Chromebook performance monitoring, and I'll ask Boris to give you a quick overview of this because he's been working in this space and actually working with the Chromebook team itself at Google. Thanks for joining us, Boris.
Yeah, thank you, Scott. It was a great introduction. I think Chromebook is both specific and not that specific because anyone working from home or working in branches, using the internet to reach SaaS applications and using security solutions around that, like cloud proxies and CASB, is just going to be affected by the same thing. So if you think, of the whole journey from a user to the cloud, there are so many traps from a performance standpoint that it's hard for someone to guess where problems actually come from. So that's why I'll show you live. Basically, when we think of experience, it's going to be driven by many factors. It's going to be driven by very local networks like Wi-Fi and the LAN and which DNS you use and what is your ISP and what is the last mile. But then you've got things that sit really in the cloud like GASBs and zero trust networks and VPNs and potentially SD1 as well if you see it in branch somewhere. And then there is where you're getting redirected by a SaaS platform in the cloud. So the first thing we're going to show you is the digital experience and what drives it and how simply we can make this obvious. And the second will be, and that's part of the digital experience, or that support the digital experience, is the hybrid connectivity. So what is the path that you take when you want to reach a certain service, and how does it affect your experience? Okay, so I think we can basically now show you a live example. So let me get onto the Cadiscap platform. We'll very simply use our own team to do that. And basically, there are three sources of information that we use to show you data. The first one is User Watcher. It's a very lightweight instrumentation of your browsers. So basically, you place an extension on your browser and you can deploy that industrially on all of your devices, Chromebooks or any device that has a browser. And the second one will be NetTracer, which will basically be deployed on Chromebook specifically as an Android app. Okay, and here are the outcomes and the insights we can get from it. So I'm looking at 3 days of our own team performance and digital experience, so we can see the different applications that are used, how many people actually connect to those applications, what is the connectivity. You can see that as a figure, or you can see a trend and basically see how people might be affected by changing conditions when they want to reach a certain application. A good example of that would be SN, which is the task management SaaS application we use internally, where you see latency is changing. And then you see indicators of user experience. So either the time which is needed to load a new page, or the time needed to make an API process, an API call. So we call that API processing. And that can be broken down between the different infrastructure layers that are going to influence the response times that you're getting. So here you see, for example, in red, the waiting time, the network layers, DNS, and latency are going to be represented in yellow. Blue is going to represent the server processing, so how long the SaaS server or the application server is taking to respond. And green is going to be the time needed to transfer data back to you, which may be short, but may be long in some cases. Google Docs is a good example. And then you will see the number of errors that might affect your users. The idea is that you get basically a high-end view of that, which application stand not so close to the users, which ones have experienced problems, which ones are affected by errors at a glance, and then you can see your users on a map and see where are the users that have trouble. So for example, when we look at page load times, it's obvious that the people in the western part of France have a much worse experience than people sitting in Canada, for example, in Montreal. And then we can see people by either their location or the internet service provider they're using to connect to the different applications. And there are obvious things, for example, the people using a zero trust network like Netscope or subset zero trust network don't get good latency. That has a direct impact on their experience. And people using our inference will have a worse latency. Okay, so you can see that by country. If there are some people sitting on site and not working remote, you can see them as well. And you can see the breakdown of those users also by the kind of endpoints they're using. So you see we've got a mix of Windows users, Mac users, Linux users, and of course Chromebook users, which is the topic for today. All right. If you want to dive into that, nothing is simpler. You just click on application and you get to a little more details as to what are the trends from a response time standpoint, the number of users, when there are basically times that are the response times that are getting bigger or error rates that are getting bigger, and who is affected by that. We've got 21 people, for example, coming from the Microsoft Zero Trust Network, and for them, latency is bad, and that has a direct impact on their experience. Okay, while we see that all the technologies used, like Zscaler, would probably prove to be good. We can also see people on site. We can see that graphically and see where are the people going to when they use the Microsoft Zero Trust Network, for example. We simply filter on that, and we see that they are going to the Zscaler platform, and we can see a list of users that are impacted. Okay. If we want to take another example, we could simply say, okay, I want to know who's impacted by this peak of response time. That would show me directly which applications are impacted by that. I would know that Google Calendar, for example, had tremendous transfer time, a lot of errors. I could see that the people impacted are the people on site in Montreal, and I could tell you exactly what is the path that they're taking and why they had such bad impact and who was the user. And I could eventually tell you, okay, what application is that user accessing? Where is he connected from? Which application is he using? Where is he having trouble? I could tell you whether he's had a peak of latency, for example. So his DNS, for example, went really bad. He was always on site. I could tell you if he lacked RAM or CPU at some point. Okay, and say that he's got a connectivity problem. The thing that probably he'll be willing to know is why he's having connectivity problems. And basically, that's something we can tell easily from Chromebooks. So we've got two groups of people using Chromebooks on our platform. Some are located in Canada, some are located in Belgium. We can see which services they're trying to reach. We can see that, for example, they've got problems with the Microsoft Media Server, a lot of loss to the media server. So we can deep dive, go into the different fleets of Chromebooks. So some are belonging to our Montreal office. There are 5 of them. Some belong to the Belgium office. There's just 1 of them. We can see the latency and the loss they're getting. We can see where they're trying to get to, what are the services that they're getting, what sort of quality of signal they're getting on the Wi-Fi, how it affects the quality. If we want to look into, for example, one fleet in particular, we would go to Montreal, and we would see basically all the Wi-Fi and connectivity services used by Montreal. And we could see, for example, that the people suffering from loss are connected through the Wi-Fi, which is called Casablanca, on the frequency, which is 2.4 gigahertz. And we could focus on this one, for example, as an example, then see the devices, see which one have good signal, poor signal, which ones got affected by us. And then we could see basically how they connected, when they were connected, when they suffered from loss. And in the end, the goal is that we can get to the point where we see which paths they're taking, how they reach the media server, and basically if there is packet loss, which is the case, we can see where it's happening. So if it's happening in the private network, on the Wi-Fi, on the last mile of the operator, or like in this case, on the Microsoft Azure network.
Well, that's a crazy network there.
In that case.
That's not just the Wi-Fi, Boris. What's going on there? That's Chromebook is connecting to all of that, or
no? It's all the different passes basically that you can take. So we're looking at 7 days. So obviously, when you go through a cloud network, there are plenty of options from a pass point of view in a cloud network. So if I restrict the time, you're going to actually see exactly what pass this Chromebook was taking at a given point in time, and that will tell you exactly where loss is happening at a given point in time.
So this is what's varying over. If you think you have a stable Wi-Fi at home, for example, and you paid for a premium one, or at the office, something else is clearly going on beyond your Wi-Fi that's varying all the time, right? So this is what this is trying to tell you, is you can find why your performance is different from one day to another when your configuration hasn't changed at all. So this is actually pretty cool. What we'll do in a second, we're going to look at that a bit more as it loads. It's a very complex network that we're analyzing here going into Microsoft's cloud network. But what Boris will show you is where the loss can actually come from. And often its latency originates from something outside of the Chromebook's control.
Correct. It can be simply something that loss can happen at any point in time and any place on the network path. So it can belong to the Wi-Fi, it can belong to your last mile operator. If you're running on an SD-WAN, it can basically come from one underlay or another, and there are possibilities for you to work around that. In the same way, when you're affected by loss, for example, on a cloud service, if you know where it comes from, you can actually take action and get another DNS resolution to be redirected to another SaaS node.
And also, I guess if you're the network operations guy, this tells you very quickly that your network itself, though you're in control of, is working very well, including like the Wi-Fi connectivity to the end user's Chromebook. But in this case, you have to have a conversation with Microsoft if that is where the loss is coming in, right? So it really saves you time because you understand right away where the responsibility lies, whether you should be working on the device, upgrading it to make sure it's behaving properly, or the Wi-Fi or the ISP. So this is a pretty good tool to understand, have a good conversation, right?
Correct. You can manage multiple vendors in a way, your ISP, your cloud provider, your zero trust network provider as well.
So what I thought, but just show them real quick how these things are deployed, because you've shown us how the data is all there in real time. It's like collected and available. But we really can see from this audience that there's a lot of administrators out there who understand remote deployment of Chromebook applications and capabilities. I just wanted to show you live here on my Chromebook what it looks like. So what you're seeing here is where the browser extension is. So this is something you could deploy through GPO or Google Workspace or Workplace ONE from VMware, right? Or you can go to the Chrome Web Store and just take that app extension, I should say, and put it into your browser. Then it's automatically connected into the Kadiska platform for analysis. And the network side is the testing is happening directly from the Chromebook of the user. And we use the smallest footprint possible is actually an Android app. And you can also deploy that so it's persistent. It happens every time the user reboots, it comes back online. It continues to test to those specific applications you want. And you can pick this up if you just wanted to try it quickly on the Android Google Play Store. And you see here, I've already got this one installed, but I'll just showing it to you, see what it looks like. And then you can go into the system tray, you can see it there. You can turn on and off notifications to the user. And usually it's silent, it's running in the background. But you can also open up the app, just like any other app on a Chromebook, and it's responsive, so you can see what's happening, whether the tests are working properly, make sure that the end-to-end performance is being analyzed at the frequency that you've chosen. So in this case, it would be every 15 minutes, it would be testing from every user's workstation. And that's designed to make sure that there's no battery consumption that would impact the user at all. It still gives you all the data that you need to really understand everyone's performance, regardless of where they are. So that's just what I wanted to show you guys. It's actually really simple, something you guys can try out. And actually, we're happy to help you with that. Just you can make a request here. We'll set up a trial for you guys to test it and see if it works well in your environment. Certainly cuts down the administration time dramatically. Very cost-effective way to manage your fleet of Chromebooks and actually Android phones as well. So I think we've shown you a lot of what we want to show you today, but I also wanted to just ask you guys to give us a bit of information, which is really to see how you guys are actually managing your Chromebooks, right? How you manage the applications on there. So what I did was create a really quick survey for you here. And the survey is just a one-page, one-question survey. So if you type in that address, which you saw on the screen, learn.kadiska.com/MDM for mobile device management, and just fill this in, then what we can do is see what the tendencies you guys have in terms of how you manage. And these devices, like the Chrome extension, the Android application that does the network tracing, are all things you would push through the VM directly to those devices. You can connect all that in through your Active Directory, so you know exactly who's where if they're not directly into the browser. So those one thing I wanted to show you, and I think we have a chance here to take a look at the results. So what do you think about this, Boris? Does this surprise you at all in terms of the breakdown of how these responses have come in?
Really not. The fact that people use the native Google Workspace admin console is logical when you use a Google solution, so that there's no surprise here. Workspace ONE is definitely the second. We see a lot of customers, so there's no surprise here either.
Yeah, so this should look familiar to you, but actually what's interesting is, we do have customers who use almost all these techniques to distribute and manage the Chromebook monitoring. So really simple thing for them to do, and something we've worked with, like I mentioned, the Google Chromebook team directly to make sure that this is a very easy system to deploy on your fleet of Chromebooks and make sure you can administrate them very easily. And I think this is just a quick intro to what we're doing, but actually trying Cadiska is the best way to understand how it can help you in your day-to-day administration of your Chromebooks and the applications on them, and really cut those trouble ticket resolution times down to the shortest possible, so you can make sure your employees are productive and that your Chromebooks are being adopted and enjoyed as much as you guys enjoy working on them, I'm sure. Boris, anything else you want to add here as we request if anybody wants to try this?
No, I think you gave the best piece of advice. Trying Cadiska basically is something that is going to take you 5 minutes. So it's definitely worth giving it a shot, seeing the data that you're going to be getting and how it can streamline your digital workspace operations and network operations at the same time.
Cool. Thanks, Boris, for joining us today and being together here to present. And we look forward to talking to you guys online. If you have any questions, you can pop them in the chat on LinkedIn, or you can connect to us on cadiska.com and book a meeting, and we'll be happy to join you. So thanks, everyone, for your time. Happy Chromebooking.